They're meeting tomorrow. Once she signs the papers, we take the house. I froze in the hallway, clutching the doorframe as their whispers crawled into my ears. My own children. Marcus and Jasmine sat at my kitchen table, speaking as if I were deaf, as if I were invisible. Mom's gone senile. Marcus muttered, his tone sharp, almost rehearsed. She forgets everything, Jasmine added. The guardianship will protect her assets. It's for her own good. Senile. That word landed like a slap. I stood there, staring at the chipped mug of tea in my hand, my fingers trembling so badly I thought the cup would shatter. My daughter, my son plotting behind my back, laughing quietly at the idea of stripping me of the very life I had built. I wanted to storm in to scream, to remind them, I am Lorraine Price, a woman who worked double shifts for 30 years, who paid off every inch of this house with sweat and sacrifice. But instead I slipped back into the shadows of the hallway, heart pounding, breath uneven. On the counter their folder lay open, blue plastic, thick with papers. I caught a glimpse of bold black letters, petition for guardianship. In that moment, I felt the room spin. To them, I was already gone. A frail old woman whose mind had collapsed like rotted wood. They had no idea I was listening, no idea that every cruel word was sinking like a stone into my chest. But they also had no idea what I carried in the pocket of my cardigan. My fingers brushed against the small recorder, still warm from use, a sliver of evidence humming quietly with the truth. They thought they were playing a clever game. But tomorrow in court, they wouldn't see me coming. My name is Lorraine Price. I am 68 years old, a widow, and I have lived in the same brick house on the east side of Baltimore for more than 4 decades. People who walk by often tell me the roses in my front yard bloom brighter than anyone else's on the block. They don't know that every petal carries the story of late nights' weary hands and a heart that refused to stop fighting. For most of my life, I worked at the city library. I shelved books, kept order in the reading rooms, and guided children through the wonder of their first stories. My job didn't pay much, but it gave me purpose. I saved every dollar I could, stretched every paycheck until it squeaked, and still managed to pack lunches, sew costumes for school plays, and keep a roof steady over my children's heads. When my husband Henry died of a heart attack 20 years ago, the weight of the household fell entirely on my shoulders. I was terrified, but I never let Marcus or Jasmine see me cry. I told myself that if I just worked harder, if I just kept giving, they would grow up strong, successful, grateful. That was the dream that pulled me through double shifts, through nights when my back screamed from bending through winters, when the heating bill made me shiver in my coat. Marcus, my firstborn, came into the world with eyes too serious for a baby. Now at 40, he still carries that sternness, though it has hardened into something colder. He married Nia, a woman sharp in both wit and tongue. Together, they've chased business ventures that seemed promising, but often left them sinking in debt. I once sold my old sedan and handed Marcus $20,000 so he could finally get ahead. He promised to pay it back. I am still waiting. Jasmine, my youngest, always had a lighter spirit. She loved dancing in the church aisles when she was a girl, spinning until her braids fanned out like a halo. Now she lives 2 hours away with her husband, Caleb Waters, and their 2 children. She calls sometimes, visits less often, and lately when she speaks to me there is a layer of distance, like she is reading from a script written by someone else. I thought my sacrifices had given them stability. I thought the sleepless nights and empty stomachs were worth it. But lately their tone has shifted. They question my memory when I repeat a story. They laugh when I fumble with the television remote. They exchange glances when I misplace my glasses. The first time it stung was Jasmine's birthday dinner. She waved her hand and said, "Mom, you're always so forgetful," when I mixed up her son's grade in school. Everyone chuckled, but I felt my cheeks burn. Not long after Marcus announced he had changed the password to my online bank account for security. He insisted it was better this way, that he could handle things more efficiently. I wanted to believe it was concern. I wanted to believe they still saw me as the woman who raised them, not the burden they whispered about. I clung to memories, Marcus running to me with scraped knees, Jasmine falling asleep on my shoulder after choir practice. I thought love would shield me from suspicion, from betrayal. But the truth was slipping through. Slowly, painfully, I realized they did not view me as capable anymore. To them, I had become fragile glass waiting to crack. They no longer asked for my opinion. They made decisions without telling me. They spoke about my future as if I weren't standing in the room. Still, I carried on. I baked pies for Sunday service. I joined the ladies' group at church, laughing over hymnals. My neighbor Rosa Delgado often came by with coffee and sharp eyes that seemed to know more than I admitted. To her, I was still Lorraine, independent, capable, stubborn. That glimpse of normalcy kept me steady. Yet in the quiet moments of my kitchen, I felt the ground shifting beneath me. My children, the very ones I had built my world around, were building a different story. A story where I was too weak to hold my own. And that story was about to become dangerous. It began with whispers, then chuckles, and soon it became an everyday cruelty that threaded itself through my life. The change wasn't sudden. It crept in like mold growing in corners I hadn't thought to watch. The first real cut came on Jasmine's birthday. I had baked her favorite lemon cake, the recipe I'd used since she was 10. Surrounded by her friends, she leaned across the table and said, half laughing, "Mom, you always forget the sugar, don't you?" Everyone laughed. I forced a smile, but my hands shook so badly that I nearly dropped the knife. When the candles flickered out, so did a piece of my dignity. Marcus followed with his own concerns. He called me one morning saying he had changed my online banking password. "You don't need to worry about bills anymore," he said, his tone patronizing the way a parent speaks to a child. "I'll take care of it. Safer that way. Safer for whom I wondered. For me or for him?" Nia, his wife, sharpened the edges further. At family dinners, she'd tilt her head and comment loudly, "Lorraine, you're repeating yourself again." Once she even placed her hand on my arm like I was fragile glass and said, "Maybe it's time you let the kids handle things. It's too much for you now." Each moment chipped away at me. The house I had kept alive with years of scrubbing and patching no longer felt like mine. They began making decisions in my absence. I'd discover new locks on the back door, passwords, changed appointments rescheduled without my knowledge. They said it was for my good, but it felt like being erased inch by inch, memory by memory. The humiliation grew sharper. At Thanksgiving, Nia loudly suggested that I move into an assisted living facility just for a trial run. The room went silent before Marcus nodded as if the decision was already made. I sat there with my plate of turkey, my mouth dry, my heart pounding, realizing that my opinion had no weight in a home I had built. Jasmine began to echo Marcus's words. On one phone call, she sighed, "Mom, you lose track of things so often. Maybe a guardianship would give us all peace of mind." Guardianship. The word tasted bitter. That wasn't peace of mind. That was a prison with a lock they controlled. The signs were everywhere if I cared to see them. My coats disappeared, tossed out because they smelled of mothballs. My doctor's appointments were mysteriously shifted to new times I hadn't agreed to. Even the spare key to my own house was missing, replaced by a temporary remote Marcus handed me with a smirk. I tried to speak up to remind them of who I was. "I've paid every bill on time for 40 years, I told Marcus. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Not anymore, Mom. Times change." Jasmine's words hurt even more. "You've done so much, Mom," she said softly, as though offering kindness. "But it's time we protect you from yourself. Protect me from myself." The most crushing moment came when I overheard them discussing the guardianship petition. Their voices were hushed, but I caught the words assets, house transfer. They weren't talking about my well-being. They were talking about possession, about stripping me of everything I had worked for. I realized then that I had become a stranger in my own family. My sacrifices were invisible. My wisdom dismissed my independence, dismantled piece by piece. They saw me not as a mother, but as an obstacle, a hurdle between them and what they believed was theirs by right. And yet, in their arrogance, they underestimated me. They thought I would break under their dismissals, that I would crumble at the sound of their laughter. But every insult, every smirk, every condescending word fueled something fierce inside me. I wasn't senile, I wasn't helpless, I wasn't done. What they didn't know was that behind the polite nods, behind the trembling hands that they mistook for weakness, I was already planning, watching, collecting, preparing for the moment when their whispers would be dragged into the light. The moment of deepest humiliation arrived on an evening I will never forget. It was meant to be a simple family gathering. Marcus had insisted we celebrate his promotion with dinner at my house. I cooked roast chicken cornbread and sweet potato pie. My kitchen smelled of warmth, but my heart was already uneasy. When everyone had eaten their fill, Nia cleared her throat and slid a folder across the table. "Lorraine," she said in a voice that dripped with rehearsed sympathy, "we need you to sign this." I blinked at the folder. "What is it?" "It's just paperwork," she replied smoothly. "You can't manage things the way you used to. This will make life easier." Her words hung in the air, cold and sharp. The room went quiet. I noticed how Marcus avoided my eyes, how Jasmine fidgeted with her napkin. "Go ahead, Mom," Marcus urged, pushing the folder closer. "It's for your good." I opened it with trembling fingers. Across the top in bold letters, "Petition for guardianship." My stomach dropped. My own son and daughter were asking me to surrender my life into their hands. "You think I can't manage?" I whispered. My voice cracked, but not from weakness, from disbelief. Nia leaned forward, her smile tight. "You repeat yourself. You forget. This way you'll be safe. Safe." The word mocked me. Something inside me shattered. I pulled my hand back so sharply that my glass of water toppled, spilling across the table. The crash of the cup hitting the floor echoed like thunder in my ears. For a moment, no one moved. I searched their faces. Marcus looked firm, almost smug. Jasmine's eyes darted nervously. And Nia, she was triumphant, like she had finally cornered me. My chest ached, but I forced myself to stand. "This is what you think of me?" I asked, my voice rising. "After everything I've given, after every night I starved so you could eat, after every dollar I saved so you could study, you see me as a burden?" No one answered. The silence was heavier than words. From the doorway, I caught sight of my neighbor, Rosa Delgado. She had come to drop off a pie but stopped when she overheard. Her eyes widened with shock, but she said nothing, retreating into the shadows. Even a witness chose silence, leaving me to drown in the betrayal of my own blood. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them see me collapse. My voice broke once more. "If respect is gone, so am I." I pushed back my chair and walked out, leaving the folder unopened on the table, leaving the food to grow cold, leaving my children staring after me. My steps down the hallway felt like carrying stones strapped to my ankles, yet each one was firm, deliberate. In that moment, I believed I had lost everything. My children, my dignity, my place at the table of my own home. They had turned me into a stranger in my own family, a shadow of the woman I once was. But what they didn't know, what none of them suspected, was that I had already prepared for this day. They thought the night ended with my defeat. They believed I would crumble under their pressure, that I would surrender to their plan. What they didn't know was that every smirk, every patronizing word had only fueled my resolve. For months I had been preparing. I had sensed the shift long before they spoke it aloud. The way Marcus insisted on managing my accounts, the way Jasmine hesitated when I asked about my own grandchildren, it was enough to tell me something darker was brewing. And so I began quietly building my defense. The first step was medical proof. I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Lila Monroe, a respected neuropsychologist at Johns Hopkins. She tested me for hours, memory exercises, problem-solving tasks, logical reasoning. At the end, she placed her hand over mine and said, "Mrs. Price, your cognitive abilities are intact. There is no sign of dementia." I asked for the full written report, stamped and signed, and I stored it safely in my desk drawer. Next came the evidence of their intentions. I carried a small recorder in my cardigan pocket everywhere I went. Whenever Marcus or Nia slipped into hushed conversations about Mom's decline, whenever Jasmine muttered about the house being too much for her, I pressed the button. Hours of recordings, each capturing their greed in their own voices. Then I secured my home. With the help of Alicia Grant, a lawyer from my church congregation, I transferred the deed into a living trust with myself as trustee. No one, not Marcus, not Jasmine, could touch it without my consent. Alicia also advised me to prepare durable powers of attorney, naming her as backup in case anyone tried to question my decisions. The final layer was the bank. I walked into the branch myself, met with manager Carla O'Neill, and explained that my children might attempt unauthorized changes. She flagged my account required in-person identification for every transaction and documented the suspicious password change Marcus had made. That record alone could expose his interference. All the while, I played my role carefully. I let them believe I was slipping. I pretended to fumble with the television remote to forget which day the trash was collected. I allowed Marcus to think he had control, allowed Jasmine to sigh in pity. Their arrogance was my camouflage. By the time they placed that guardianship petition in front of me, I already had everything I needed: proof of my competence, evidence of their scheming, legal safeguards around my home and savings, witnesses ready to testify. I may have looked broken when I walked away from that table, but inside I was steel. They thought they had cornered me. In truth, I had lured them exactly where I wanted. The next morning, as sunlight poured through the blinds, I packed my folder: medical reports, audio tapes, bank documents, legal trust papers. Each sheet was a weapon, each recording a blade. They had called me senile, but in court they would learn just how sharp my mind truly was. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and dust, the kind of scent that clings to history. As I walked through the doors, my knees trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what was about to unfold. I carried my folder pressed tight against my chest as though it were a shield. Behind me walked Alicia Grant, her voice calm, her presence steady. Marcus and Nia sat on the left side of the courtroom, dressed neatly, whispering confidently. Jasmine was beside them, her eyes darting toward the floor. To anyone watching, it looked like dutiful children reluctantly forced to protect their declining mother. They didn't see the betrayal underneath their polished masks. When the clerk called the case, Judge Harold Holloway entered. His gavel struck, echoing like thunder. Marcus rose first, his voice strong, rehearsed. He spoke of my forgetfulness, my inability to manage daily affairs, his words dripping with false concern. Jasmine nodded along, adding, "We just want Mom safe." Nia sat tall, her smile small but victorious. I let them speak. I let the judge watch their faces, listen to their lies. And then it was my turn. Alicia rose, her voice clear. "Your Honor, my client is not incompetent. She is not senile. She is fully capable of managing her affairs. We intend to prove not only her competence, but also the ulterior motives of those petitioning for guardianship." The room grew tense. Marcus frowned, his hand tightening around the edge of the table. Alicia began by presenting Dr. Monroe's report. The judge flipped through the pages, eyes narrowing as he read the words: "Cognitive abilities intact, no evidence of dementia." Then Alicia pressed play on the recorder. The courtroom filled with Marcus's voice. "Once she signs, we take the house." Gasps rippled through the benches. Nia shifted uncomfortably, her cheeks burning red. Jasmine buried her face in her hands. Next came the bank records. Carla O'Neill, the manager, testified how Marcus had attempted to change my online banking without authorization, how safeguards had to be put in place to protect my assets. The judge's expression hardened. Finally, Alicia laid out the trust documents. Mrs. Price anticipated this betrayal. She secured her home and finances legally. These children are not protecting her, they are attempting financial exploitation. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's confidence drained from his face, replaced by panic. Nia's mouth opened, but no words came. Jasmine wept quietly, whispering, "I didn't want it to go this far." Judge Holloway leaned forward. "This court will not tolerate manipulation under the guise of care." Petition denied. His gavel struck once more. "Furthermore, I will refer this matter for investigation into attempted financial elder abuse." The words hit like a hammer. Marcus slumped back, his jaw tight. Nia looked as though the ground had vanished beneath her feet. Jasmine sobbed openly, now her apologies spilling out in fragments. I sat there, spine straight, hands folded. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift. Not because the fight was over, but because the truth had been spoken aloud for all to hear. As we walked out of the courtroom, reporters' cameras flashed. Elder abuse cases were rare, and my story would not stay hidden. I didn't hide my face. Let the world see. Let other mothers know they were not alone. Marcus avoided my eyes as he passed. Nia clutched his arm, whispering furiously. Jasmine lingered near the doorway, her face streaked with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. I looked at her for a long moment, then simply said, "Sorry. Doesn't erase betrayal." Outside, Rosa Delgado waited, clutching her purse. She smiled through tears. "You did it, Lorraine. You showed them." I nodded, breathing in the crisp air. "No, Rosa," I replied softly. I showed myself. That evening I returned to my house, unlocked the door with my own key, and stepped into the quiet warmth of my living room. The walls no longer felt like a cage. They felt like mine again. I wasn't just defending property or money. I was reclaiming my dignity, my voice, my life. And in doing so, I made sure no one, not even my own blood, would silence me again. When I walked out of that courtroom, I wasn't just a mother who had defended her home. I was a woman who had reclaimed her dignity. For too long, I let their whispers define me, allowed their condescension to shrink me. But in the end, it was my strength, my preparation, and my truth that carried me through. Family is supposed to be a shelter, not a storm. It broke my heart to learn that my own children could betray me so deeply, but it also reminded me that love does not excuse exploitation. No matter who they are, son, daughter, or spouse, if they strip away your voice, you must fight to take it back. I have learned that age is not weakness. Wisdom is not frailty. We, the elders, carry decades of resilience. We are not invisible, and we are not to be silenced. Now I spend my afternoons hosting a small reading circle at the church, helping other seniors share their stories. We laugh, we cry, and we remind each other that our voices matter. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: protect your mind, your home, your name. Don't wait for someone else to defend your worth. Stand firm, because even in betrayal, you can rise stronger than ever.